Tonight on the Daily X, special guest, sportscaster and sports podcaster Tom Fleming will join me to discuss a couple of stories in the headlines. We're going to talk about the Palma Volcano, which is currently erupting in the Canary Islands, and several years ago had been modeled to be something that could trigger an apocalyptic tsunami, which would wipe out the East Coast. We're also going to talk about an article that's up in Discover Magazine right now, which ponders whether an ancient non-human civilization could have arose and disappeared many, many millions of years ago. Interviewed in that is the current head of NASA. And then finally, we're going to discuss a legendary Native American creature that is little known, and I myself had never heard of, but it's something that is a part of the folklore of Cape Cod Indians.
A slide from this mountain could kill millions of people in Europe and along America's eastern seaboard. Some eminent scientists warn that it's purely a matter of time till it happens.
X-Files, our X-Files. Welcome to our X-Files Vault. Regular people talking about unexplained phenomena, UFOs, ghosts, cryptids, hidden archaeology, weird science. Our stories, our takes, our X-Files Vault.
Hey everybody, welcome to Daily X. I'm here with special guest Tom Fleming, who's a podcaster, broadcaster extraordinaire. Hey Tom.
How you doing?
He is, if you're getting a hankering for a Corona beer, that's because of Tom's background. He is sitting on the beach apparently somewhere down in North Carolina.
I wish. Now this is a picture from many moons ago. I am in North Carolina, but I'm not on a beach. I'm actually in my little pod shed. So
that's a pretty cool thing too. If you can just have a shed but you can change, like in a little virtual world, take it to wherever you want. That's the future, I think, where it'll make you feel like you're on the beach, like on those old Star Trek shows.
It actually makes me feel better wearing this Hawaiian shirt and seeing the picture of myself. It makes me feel like I'm closer to the beach, although I know I'm not.
Yeah.
All right.
So the
first. Sorry. Go ahead.
That's okay. No, interesting in the news today was the La Palma volcano that's exploding, or it's on the island of La Palma. And I don't know if you had time to research that at all, Tom, but the risk of tsunami, we all remember that about 10 years ago, the models, there were certain scientists that came out with models that showed a possible, 30-meter wave hitting the East Coast or something. Did you find out anything interesting on that?
Well, yeah, I read about it, and I mean, interesting. Well, yeah, I mean, obviously it's interesting because it could mean literally millions of people dead and a total disruption of the economy. I have a sort of a natural resistance to apocalyptic things, like just the idea. And then you see, like in Japan, not too long ago, was at Fukushima, right? Yeah. Like that took out that plant, that monsoon or whatever it was, that literally did take out hundreds of thousands of lives and businesses and buildings. Remember, there were buses floating down the road. As far as
that was tsunami. That was a tsunami from an earthquake.
Yes, that's right. Tsunami. That's the word that was escaping me. Yes, exactly. Different. But I mean, you see things like that and you realize that nature can act on a scale that large, on a scale so large, it will destroy a city in 6 hours in the time it takes a wave. So but again, as far as the geological probability, which is what some of the articles I glanced at were talking about, it's so hard for me to really parse that. You know what I mean? Like, is it really going to happen? So if it happens, I guess that's what we should talk about. If we're not going to talk about the geological factors, is what would be the impact if it really came in at 30 meters and spread across basically the entire Atlantic? Both sides, from what I could see, would get hit.
Yeah.
So what part of it would you like to address? What do I think would happen the day after? Or, during would basically be like fucking 9/11 times a million. You know what I mean? Because there would be so many people involved. And then the day or two after, when, that immediate disaster is gone, the humanitarian aspect would be, almost apocalyptic. At least for certain parts of the world, it would be almost apocalyptic.
In your research, what did you see was the worst case scenario for wave size?
Well, I think it was about what you said, like 30 meters, 40 meters, maybe 120 feet, right? 120 feet. Imagine that. You can't do anything with that. You can't do anything. I don't know what you would do, because so much of the country on the coastline is below that sea level wise.
Yeah.
And you've got the whole ocean surging at you. That's hopefully it's not behind me right now. It's just a huge wave. If I disappear, it means La Palma went off.
Well, yeah, it's pretty bad since you're inside a shed about 150 miles inland. So
yeah, that's true. I am. Although we're going to the beach. We're going to the beach in a couple weeks. It'll probably be my luck. The minute we get to we're going to Surf City, North Carolina. Not that anyone cares. Topsail Island, whatever. Yeah, we'll get there, check into our B&B, and then hear on the news that the volcano went off. Oh, fuck. We're literally on the water. This sucks.
I actually did, after we talked about that yesterday on the phone, you were correct that the timeline, actually, you do get about an 8-hour warning for the East Coast.
8 hours.
So a very, very long warning. Be the world's,
United States.
yes. So it would be the world's biggest traffic jam, but you would have 8 hours to get people out. And I think another scenario too is that obviously if you get a 30-meter wave, that's just ridiculous. That's going to destroy cities. But that's the worst case scenario. But you get a smaller landslide, you might get a 10-meter wave, which would still be incredibly destructive. And where is the level where a tsunami would not be destructive on the East Coast? With a 3-meter wave, say 10 feet, that would still be pretty destructive, but probably wouldn't kill that many people probably. But if you got something that's 6, 7, 8, 9 meters, how much damage would something like that?
As I understand it, it's not a single wave that'll happen. It's literally like a tilting. So it's a flow that will happen, and then eventually it'll find its low spots. Yeah. But yeah, so it would be rather picturing Boston, right? Well, picture Boston, city with skyscrapers literally hanging over the ocean. They're right at ground level. They get hit with what'd you say, a 10-meter? So a 30-foot wave or something like that?
Yeah.
Whew. First of all, again, I'm going to concentrate on Boston because we're both familiar with it. The T is done, right? Now there's no more subway. That's gone. That's completely underwater, filled with water. That'll be gone.
Same with New York,
Same as New York, yes. New York for other people who don't know Boston as well. New York, everyone knows that. Yeah.
I think you'd be fine inside if you're in a skyscraper, okay, and you get hit by a big wave. Just go up high enough, because a skyscraper, it's going to take out the windows, but it's not going to damage the building. It's not going to destroy the building. You'll be fine. It's not going to topple a skyscraper.
Holy shit! That reminds me. Did you ever see? All right, this is going back totally divergent. Did you ever see a made-for-TV movie or a miniseries called Condominium back in the 70s or 80s? Have you ever seen that?
Yes, and it's like a wave that comes from a hurricane, right?
Yes, it is right. And then, yes, and people are rushing from different floors and everything. Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, the best thing, the fastest thing would be to get upstairs, get as high as you can. Yeah. Of course, it'd be far preferable to be out of that building, because who knows how much, that's the other thing, how many foundations will be undermined, the force of that water and just the drag back when it recedes. You probably want to get the fuck out of any big building.
Maybe if it's a worst case scenario thing, like a 30-meter wave, I would imagine that would topple skyscrapers too. I don't know that for a fact, But I'm I've studied pretty closely what happened in Japan. In steel structured buildings that got hit by 30-foot waves, so 10-meter waves, they held up fine, but the glass got wiped out and the water goes through the building.
Yes, it goes right through them. That happened in Florida not too long ago after one of their big hurricanes. You could go, maybe it was in the Caribbean and one of the ones that hit. You could literally see the water flowing in the front of a motel, hotel, whatever, and flowing out the back, totally unimpeded.
Right.
Going right through it.
So
and that's probably what would happen.
Yeah. So if you're up high enough, it's not going to topple the building, as long as it's not a worst case scenario, like something crazy. But, something more realistic, like what we saw in Japan, you'd be safe inside a steel building as long as you were up high enough. But, but all the other damage that it would do, you saw all those buildings in Japan that were not steel, they all get swept away, so a 30-foot wave coming into Boston it's hard to, I can't predict exact, but it would definitely sweep away a lot of those wooden structures, I would think.
It would change the shape of the coastline, I would think. Just at least, along the softer parts of the coast. That happens with every hurricane. The coast moves. Sandbars move with just a normal hurricane. We had something like that. It might be unrecognizable.
Yeah.
And while we're talking about Boston, or I guess the equivalent in Boston, the equivalent is Cape Cod, very flat vacation place. And New York, is that like Long Island? Long Island is pretty low lying. So they would probably deal with the same sort of problem, is that every building, and probably every building in Long Island will get hit. Every building at the Cape will get hit.
Yeah.
And then a lot of them are old, historic, expensive.
Yeah.
I think it would be I wonder, now, one thing I didn't, just to ramble on here, one thing I did not note in any of the research I read, or any of the stories I read, rather, was a way to stop it. Have you seen anyone say that? Like, people come up with scenarios. What happens if a meteor is coming at us? We've got a week to intercept it. Like, there have been those, like, movie scenarios, right?
Yeah.
Where they have to go blow it up or nuke it. Like, no one has said, oh, okay, there's a way to prevent this, because you can't, right? There's no way.
I wouldn't think so. I mean, because the problem is that, see, the tsunami is actually caused by a landslide that going into the ocean.
Underwater, yes, it changes the whole.
Yeah. So if you don't have, well, no, it's not. It's the landslide from the volcano itself. Like, say, part of the volcano.
But all right, as I understand the one in Japan, because it changes the depth.
Well, that one, but we're talking about the La Palma.
Oh, yeah. I keep getting them confused because I've only seen the footage of the one that's actually out.
Yeah. So the one in La Palma is part of the volcano. The slope collapses into the ocean, and so that displaces water, causing the tidal, the tsunami. So I guess in theory you could look at that and say, is there? But that's a massive amount of earth. So I'm not sure. And if you start trying to remove some of that earth or take mitigating measures to prevent it, you might actually trigger it, right? So I mean,
I know. So I don't know why it actually was in the news so recently, because there was some activity, right?
Oh, more than some activity. They've abandoned thousands of people have had to be removed from their homes. It's ongoing now. The last time I guess that it had eruptions was 50 years ago, but it is known to go. It's a cyclical volcano that every 30, 40, 50 years it does erupt, and it's having it's ongoing eruptions right now. There's significant eruptions. There's lava flow, the lava that reaches the ocean. So there's a second lava stream that opened up this week. So it's in a very active stage. It's in a very active state at the moment.
I should have watched the video, but I didn't want to ruin it. I'd rather hear from you and then go look at it and stuff. But I did read about it, but I have not watched the video. So does it look sort of like the Hawaiian Islands, where the lava is dripping off all the time and like building new land?
I would imagine so. I don't know specifically. Each one of those volcanoes is different, so I don't know. I didn't see anything extensive on it, but I do know that lava flows have threatened homes and are reaching the water, and it's like a second flow that's ongoing right now. So but from what I read yesterday, I read kind of a skeptical article in USA Today, which that be skeptical about that news source anyways. But so
reading the back of a cereal box. It's ridiculous. Written by a 9-year-old, that paper. What do you do?
But so they talk to scientists who are trying to calm any fears that people may have, because people do remember, the stories on this, and they were saying you would need an eruption and an earthquake to happen pretty much at the same time to cause that level of a landslide to go into the ocean. But
that occurred to me. No, that occurred to me while reading it too, because an earthquake is a larger geological event than a volcano collapse, right? You would think, like what happened in Japan, which is what I keep going back to, would cause a tsunami, right? It would cause a larger problem than a simple, like literally, if half a mountain fell in the ocean, it's still only making up 0.0000001% of the volume of the ocean. So it would only rise by that much. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, I thought some of them sounded a little bit scare tactic-y, but also interesting, sort of like the meteor thing. You got to think about it. Even if it's not super likely, it's interesting to think about. Is there a way to deal with?
There's different kinds of earthquakes, because obviously volcanoes cause earthquakes too. You're thinking of an earthquake that's like a tectonic plate shift. That's what you're. So I think that's probably more what was the case in Japan. But I couldn't tell you what is, the amount of earth that was displaced in that shift in Japan compared to the shifting that of if, let's say, the side of a mountain falls into the water. That's
what I'm picturing. Like, that's sort of how I picture the disaster at the La Palma. If it were to happen, that's what's going to happen. It's going to be one of those volcanoes that like almost falls in half. It blows up so hard, and it blows up from below and above and gone. I mean, just the idea that that would be able to affect us here, about 8 hours later. I mean, I know it worked. I mean, the water's got to go somewhere. So there will be an effect. But I did think some of them were sort of just trying to gin it up a little bit, like the, media that's going to crash into the earth.
Yeah, those waves, they move until something stops them. They don't really lose that much energy. But I think it would, what's the, is it Mount Pinatubo? Is that the one?
Philip, yeah.
So I'm sorry, that's the Philippines. What's the one in Italy where
Vesuvius?
Vesuvius. That's where Pompeii was buried. If you had something like that where it just kind of blew its top, I don't know, maybe that might be enough to throw enough cubic feet into the water. Even then, I don't know, but but no one's predicting that kind of thing to happen. But I guess the volcanoes are still unpredictable, right? So that has a more,
It is kind of interesting. Volcanoes are kind of interesting just on their own, not even counting the disaster. When you think about, we live on a planet that if we went and visited Mars and we found these massive bowls of boiling lava instead of just dry dust everywhere, it would be fascinating to us. Yeah. Like, oh my God, look at how bizarre this is. Where, in fact, on every continent on Earth, we've got a volcano. I'm guessing, like active or dormant or active. There is one.
Yeah, including Antarctica.
Yes, I've heard about it. There's one underneath Antarctica, right?
There's several that are underneath that are responsible for some of the melting that goes on. Yeah. I do it when I see. I remember weird things. I don't know if you remember this too. This was a reading assignment in school when I was a kid. So you're talking a long time ago. But there was a story, and I don't even remember if it said where this took place. So I'm going to guess it was probably Italy. But how this kid is out. He's a farmer. His family owns a farm. And he's out working the farm, and all of a sudden there's a little thing that's a pile of dirt that starts growing in his yard or whatever. It starts getting bigger and bigger. And next thing you know, it turns into a volcano. I don't know. I was like 10 or 12.
I've heard that story.
You remember that story?
Is that a true story or is that a plot from a movie? I'm serious.
No, it was something that was presented as a true story when I was a kid in one of those things that you read as a kid. But I read it when I was a kid, so I don't really remember.
That sounds vaguely familiar. That would be kind of both awesome and terrifying at the same time. It's like, like
I don't know why that stuck with me. Because you and I were in school close enough to the same. Back then, everybody read the same public school.
I probably read that.
You probably read it, yeah. So it's probably in your head somewhere. So just segueing into a related subject, and this wasn't a great article, but this is I was telling Tom earlier, so I recently got a subscription. That's Tom, to Discover magazine, which I used to read when I was a kid. I used to get a subscription to when I was a kid because I love science. And it's not a great or serious magazine, but it has kind of populist kind of stories, So for $1.99 a month, I figured I'd take a shot at, that's pretty cheap. So one of the articles on here was 5 apocalypses that humanity has already survived. So if anybody wants to go to Discover, they can find this article, which isn't really that great of an article, but it's actually worth at least considering. So they identified the Toba eruption as the top on their list. And I'm sure you've heard of this. This is the largest volcanic eruption in human history, but it happened 74,000 years ago. So not recorded human history, but in a time.
It only exists in the geological record.
Yeah.
Right? As far that's how we know about it. No one ever wrote about it. No one ever drew it or painted it. Yes, Yeah.
But so still pretty cool. It was, so it's this is in modern day Indonesia. And it's believed to be the biggest eruption in history, blah, blah. Achieved an 8 on the volcanic explosivity index. I don't know what an 8 is, but it sounds high. If it's 8 to 100, I guess it's not, but
it's a wonder. I mean, if it's the most powerful one ever, they must have like a theoretical 10, right?
Yes, super, right.
So there's a theoretical 10.
But that would be an extinction causing event.
Right?
Yeah. So ash spread throughout the blocking. Let's see. Said dropping worldwide temperatures by 3 to 5 degrees. So that's pretty cool.
All right, but you're talking about 75,000 years ago, or something like that.
Yeah.
Not to totally. Do you have more to go? I was just going to mention. You know, of course, about the year with no summer, right?
Oh yes.
In the United States. Yeah. So that sounds like a massive version of that.
And so that was Krakatoa, wasn't it?
Yeah, Krakatoa caused that. And how bizarre must that have been?
Yeah.
How weird must that have been? I mean, they had scientists, but they were in universities and they were in there. Actually, most of them, many of them were religious figures who were trying to figure out what was going on. And
well, there are accounts. There were European sailors on boats.
Yes,
I've seen some of the accounts from it. Yeah.
But if you're sitting in Pennsylvania as a settler, you know what I mean? You have no fucking idea. Why do we not have sun this summer? And it's dust from a fucking halfway across the world. It's just amazing how powerful they are.
It must be humans' fault, right? That's what they were thinking, right?
It's global warming. Fucking aerosols. Goddamn hairspray and Freon.
I told you not to dig those canals.
Yeah.
Those damn steamboats.
Yeah. So the one 75,000 years ago must have been like a massive version of that to have that effect. So even that had a huge effect. Even the smaller one. It's early 1800s, right? I can't remember the year.
Yeah, around 1815, something like that. I think.
Okay, somewhere around there. That sort of thing. Yeah, actually, that must have changed like all crops, like the way they grew. Animals reproduced and nested and lived. It must have been a really sort of a reset in nature, I would say.
Well, so with this Toba one from 74,000 years ago, I'm reading here. It says that studies suggest that only 3 to 10,000 human individuals survived. From the global,
and then the rest of us have all descended and dispersed from that group of survivors. I have seen that theory.
And I'm not sure if it doesn't go that, but I've seen the bottlenecks that have theories that they can tell by looking at DNA. Have you seen that? They can look at DNA and say, so they can look and say that X amount of time ago, there was a bottleneck where the human race just somehow based on studying the mutation rates, where they can say there was a bottleneck at this period and, this amount of generations back, and there was a bottleneck here, so there's been a couple of those bottlenecks where the human race shrank, but I don't know. So at that time, my understanding is that although that's a transitional period. So my understanding is that Homo sapiens first evolved 300,000 years ago in Africa. And at that time, most of the world was already inhabited by humanoids, Homo erectus and Neanderthals. They had been around for several 100,000 years. And but Homo sapiens didn't really make it out of Africa until about literally that time, 75,000 years ago. That's the estimates of when they first made it out of Africa. And I guess they found studies that in Israel, Homo sapiens did venture out about 100,000 years ago, but they were slaughtered by the Neanderthals. The Neanderthals were like, no, we're not putting up with these. We're not putting up with this immigration.
Build a wall.
We're gonna build a wall. Yeah.
We don't know what walls are yet. We haven't invented walls. Oh, fuck. Hello, wall.
Yeah.
Hey, do you know where Neanderthals got their name?
From is there a town in France, I think, or
Neander Valley, the Neander Valley. And I checked on the map to see if I'd ever been there, and I don't think I have. Like even through it, like on a train or anything when I was over there. And I don't think I have, but I made a mental note that next time I am in Europe, which was supposed to be a year ago, whatever. We're going back eventually. I'm going to make a point to go there, just sort of be there. You know what I mean? Because
what about investigating some of the? You could go check. I don't know if these aren't necessarily Neanderthal sites, but what about some of the cave art that's over there?
Oh, Allison has seen. I don't think I've ever seen any real cave art. I'm not 100% sure of that. So I've been on some cultural tours where maybe we did. But Allison has seen real cave art. Not the one in France. What's the super famous one? You know the one with the...
Yeah, I'll know it if you say it. I'll know it if you say it, but I can't.
It's just skipping my mind. What'd you say the name?
No, I would know it if you say it, but I can't think of it.
Yeah, I do too. I would too. It's weird that it's not in my head. But anyway, I would love to see that stuff. I just think it's kind of cool.
And for those of you who don't know, out in our massive public audience, Allison is Tom's boss.
That's right. Yeah. Oh, she doubles as my wife on the weekends. But
yeah.
Most of the time, she's just my boss.
So interesting though. Yeah. So that was a huge disaster that may have caused one. It makes me, because it says the human population went down to that, but I wonder how did that impact the Neanderthal population, and could that have even made open? I'm just connecting this here that 74,000 years ago, around the same time when Homo sapiens first made it out and finally overtook the rest of the world. Did that event contribute to that? Possibly. Did it weaken out, for instance, the Homo erectus and the Neanderthal populations, whatever other populations are out there, because there were other ones. Did it possibly weaken them and make, we moved into the void? I don't know. Just
that maybe. And interesting that you brought up the bottlenecking and stuff, the genetically determined. So I think I told you that me and my wife did the 23andMe or whatever it is, the thing, and it tells you the ratio of Neanderthal DNA you have, literally of another species. And I was at like 65%. Allison, whose family is from France and Germany, her descendants, was at like 9. Like she had more Neanderthal DNA than 90% of the population. I had more than like 65% of the population. Yeah. Whereas like an Asian person would have none, or not none maybe, but very little. Like a person from Korea or Japan, apparently they would have very, very little of that. So it does make you think that it was probably a localized event. Local meaning, one continent.
Well, it's present in all human populations with the exception of sub-Saharan Africans. They have zero.
They never did. Yeah.
They have zero.
No. Oh, shit. All right.
They have zero.
I don't want to misspeak, but I think the Australian Aboriginals had an absurd rate of either more or less. You know what I mean? Do you know what I mean? The people, they have a different look to them, right? And I can't remember, but they were, I don't know. I went on a deep dive on it like 2 years ago, and I fucking hate that phrase, deep dive. Never let me use it. God, I hate that phrase. But
the Aborigines arrived in Australia phenomenally a long time ago, like something like 26,000 years ago, if that sticks in my mind.
Yeah, so they never met another culture to interbreed with or anything.
Oh, no, they may have. There may have been other cultures there. Like, look about, what's the one, the little hobbits there? Florian.
Oh, God, Florensis.
Florensis, yeah. Yeah, there are other, and genetic scientists are saying that there are other undiscovered hominid populations that were out there, because they're in our genes.
I mean, well, that's sort of what the Discover article sort of hinted at, right?
Yeah.
Didn't it sort of reference that a little bit without giving a lot of data, but it sort of mentioned that.
There's a big one in Russia, I think, called Denisovan, or I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it right.
Yeah, Denisovan. That's exactly right.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's how I pronounce it, at least. So yeah.
Yeah. That's where Dennis comes from. but yeah, just so I'm wondering if there was, everybody's always debated, why did Homo sapiens get Neanderthals to go extinct? And there's always been, for a long time, did they interbreed? We now know, as you just discussed, we now know that they did.
We have to have, yeah.
Did we conquer them? But there's reasons to think that that had nothing to do with it. It could even be as simply if we had a higher birth rate than they did, that would be enough. But Neanderthals had larger brains and were physically stronger. It doesn't mean, but there's also reason to suggest this, a really interesting book. I think I told you about this privately once, called Sapiens. It's a scientific study, and it talks about a lot of this stuff. But in that theory was that somewhere around 75,000 years ago, Homo sapiens in Africa, their brains began to rewire in such a way that we invented fictions, which, great as a writer, I love to hear that, but we were able to create fictions, and that enabled us to communicate with large numbers of people. Whereas if you look at, say, chimpanzees, the chimpanzee tribe can only get to about 100, 150, and then it has to split off. So they have to split into two different tribes, which eventually, but human being, and he gives an example, you could have 60,000 people at a soccer game watching the game, and they're all reasonably well behaved. Although I'm not sure what soccer he used to watch, but whereas you could not put 60,000 chimps inside a stadium, it'd be pandemonium, but because humans buy into these ideas, they have these fictions, and that has increased our ability to communicate, to form large tribes and eventually kingdoms, and that led to civilization. And that's the advantage that's what gave us the advantage over Neanderthals and other. Yeah. It's interesting.
The way I've heard it phrased a couple times, or somewhat like this, is so Neanderthal or early humans prior to our current state were able to communicate facts, but we were able, with representative art and with fiction, be able to communicate ideas.
Exactly.
Let's create sort of legends that teach lessons that last beyond the teller's death. So I tell you a story, I die, and you're my kid, you tell your kid. It is a story that has value, and then you sort of, and then you build on that. And again, fiction becomes part of it.
That's exactly right. And they used an example too, just like the one you just said. And he said, so for instance, a Neanderthal could communicate to the other in the family, there's a lion down by the river, don't go down there this morning.
Exactly. That's the same example of.
Whereas Homo sapiens could say there's a monster down there and make something up, and you can't go down there unless you pay me or something. I mean, there's all kinds of ways you can use this fiction. But so that was his theory, and it seems plausible to me. But now I'm wondering, when I look at this and say, if Mount Toba happened right at that exact same moment, more or less, that Homo sapiens were bottled into Africa and were trying to break out. So I wonder if that could have had an impact.
Probably did. There's so much written on this. It's so hard to keep up with, but I like it all. It's all cool to talk about. While we're on ancient peoples, I just want to do a little special treat for our viewers. This, if you can see it properly, was found by my wife, Allison, on one of our hikes around the North Carolina rivers. And I've looked it up. Now I know I can see it's going off. It's made of chert. It is a 6,000-year-old arrowhead, according to experts. Isn't that amazing? So I know we're talking 75,000, but 6,000 years ago, somebody, and you can't really see it on here, but the chip marks are very evident and even. Somebody was killing their food with this here where we're living. And
or their neighbor.
Or their neighbor. Yeah, you're right. Although experts have told me it could have been used that it probably would have started as a weapon, and then because it's made of this good stone that they like, because it chips evenly, it would have been eventually used as a drill. Like they never would have thrown it away. It would have worn down and gone from axe to knife to drill, like the leather punch or whatever. But imagine that 6,000 years ago, some dude who lived 20 minutes from me made this and then lost it in the stream, and my wife finds it. How crazy is that? It's called a Yadkin Point. If anyone's going to look it up and check me, look for Yadkin Points. And they're 5,000 to 7,000 years old, I think.
That's an amazing find. Yeah, I would love to find something like that. I look
for them every day. We've never found one since. I've never found anything like it since. But it's just so obviously man-made. It caught our eye. I'm so glad it did. It's very cool.
It looks like looks like they found a really nice piece of stone to use there too, you know.
Yeah, they call it chert, C-H-E-R-T. I think it's sort of in the flint family, but it apparently it really does chip very regularly. If you know, like you tap it right, like the same size flake will come off. So it was very popular to use for these sort of things. I think 6,000 years ago was almost as fascinating as 75. You know what I mean? Because 6,000, again, you're pre-pyramids. I mean, the Bering Ice Bridge had only melted a few thousand years ago, right? Well, I mean,
around 11,000.
Yeah. So I just think it's fascinating. All right, go back. Sorry for my show and tell.
No, that was great. That's awesome. So why don't we try to go into the other topic that we had up here? I find this interesting. This is something in Discover magazine. What if we aren't the first advanced civilization on Earth? And it's cool to take this seriously, at least to think about what and how long it would take for evidence of our civilization to be destroyed in a way that would be very difficult to find. And so, for instance, they even mention here that the oldest expansive patch of Earth's surface right now is only
Negev Desert.
It's the Negev Desert, and it's only in southern Israel, and that dates back to 1.8 million years, and that's the oldest. So everything else that was on the surface 2 million years ago is gone. It's buried somewhere, like well under the surface, you know, and crushed by rock or flood and fire and whatever else. So decay. And so you just wonder, like, so 2 million, if our civilization was to end tomorrow, you know, 2 million years from now, what could you be able to find, let alone 50 million years from now, you know? Because life's been around for a long time.
And in the article you mentioned, they brought up plastics, chlorofluorocarbons, whatever, things that don't appear in nature would be an indicator to a future geologist. And I guess that's right, but we haven't found that for anyone before us. And I think they sort of brushed up against that too. Like they haven't found like any layered geological time epoch layer, whatever, that had anything artificial in it, right?
Actually, they have found something, not objects, but what they found, and you know, wait for it, you know where this is going, but there is a segment of geologic history now known as the Paleocene Eocene thermal maximum. So this was a time when carbon levels inexplicably spiked, temperatures soared, ecosystems toppled, global warming.
Well, wouldn't a volcano do that? We were just talking about volcanoes doing all of that. I mean, volcanoes do all of that, right? So.
Well, it's you know, we don't want to make the show political, but it is kind of funny. It's like, so when they look at evidence for something like that, which was, it says 56 million years ago. So we could point to that and say, see, that shows that natural climate change can happen and does happen, right? Whereas they look at that and they say, it must have been SUVs, you know. But, you know, and this is Gavin Schmidt, who is either is or was the head of NASA and stuff like that. He's obviously a big global warming advocate. But
I know. I don't like that guy. I hate these guys who are so qualified and so experts, and they sound like fucking Greta Thunberg. It's just disgusting to me, you know?
But it is, you know, avoiding the political stuff of climate science as much as we can. It is cool to think about this. I mean, to at least be able to ask those questions openly. If you had a civilization, and when I say a civilization, it wouldn't be human, just some kind of advanced creature. It could be an advanced reptile, whatever, you know, a really smart crocodile.
The Silurian theory, is that what it's called?
Yeah, because it was from Doctor Who. Yeah,
that was in the article, but I've heard that before. I've seen people use that term before, like reptilians who, you know, and it's not impossible. You know, I can't I don't think that we are not the first advanced civilization. I think we are the first one, but it's not impossible, and it's almost impossible to rule out. So if something that's impossible to rule out, then you gotta consider it, right? I mean, because it's a 1 in a million chance, but it's there. I wonder though, God, I mean, and that was another thing that was sort of, it's obliquely addressed in some of these articles, but not directly, is how parallel to us would they be? Like, would they really be building skyscrapers and internet connection, or would they do something totally different? Would they go a totally different direction that would be undetectable to us as influenced by an advanced civilization? I have no fucking clue.
That's a really great point. And I wish that they would, I thought the same thing. And I wish that they would consider that too, because they just seem to think that their science is going to look very similar to our science. And they're going to be using similar energy sources. Now, obviously you have to, if we accept that the laws of the universe are still the same as then as they are now, we all understand that, then there's not going to be psychic energy or something like that. But still, there could be different types of science. There could be things that we haven't discovered yet that we might discover, 50 years from now. But everything could look very different.
Yeah, like unrecognizable to us. I mean, we could have evidence right in our backyard and have no clue. Oh, this topsoil is actually remnants of whatever, a civilization from 50 million years ago. No fucking clue. No,
especially when you consider their brains would be completely different than ours. You're not talking about primate brains. You're talking about, I mean,
you're not talking about our same morality, our same. It might not even be our same reproductive method. You know what I mean? We might not even be family groups. It could just be because reptiles they don't hang out. They
lay eggs.
We could have been ants. It could have been ants running the shit. And that's the other thing is, what would you call an advanced civilization? We are obviously the most advanced that we know, just because in our own lifetime we've seen it and we've got to this point to today, and tomorrow will be a little more advanced. That's it. But I would think that if you were the time the guy made this fucking arrowhead, he would have considered 1500 advanced, advanced culture beyond his understanding. Sailing ships. Oh my God. You know what I mean? Cannons. That to him would be space alien shit. But I don't know. But I mean, it's very. You can go down quite a hole thinking about that, going back century by century as to what creates. So the first advanced civilization, we'll call it Egypt, right? Let's call it that. No, actually, was the one prior to that that you could really bank on? I'll call it Egypt.
I mean, I don't, it depends on what you mean by advanced or technology. I mean, Göbekli Tepe was like 10,000 years ago.
Yeah, that one is weird, but I don't know enough about that. Even as many documentaries as I watch about it, I still don't know anything about it. It's one of those things you just hear the same.
Well, nobody does, because all you have is the stone remnants and the drawings that are on them and stuff like that. But we don't know their language. We don't even, they presumably didn't have writing. So we just don't really know anything about their culture or their technology. So I'm not sure if you want to count.
Yeah, so I mean, but they're an advanced culture, even though they might be living almost like nomadic cavemen. Who knows? We don't know. They probably weren't nomadic because they built the structures, but they might not have been living any better than they were 20,000 years before. Or maybe they were because was there evidence of like barley and stuff? So they had begun agriculture there, right? They found seeds and stuff.
I believe modern agriculture, that's the thing that's shocking about it. My understanding is, and I could be wrong on this, that modern agriculture, the plants that we use were not domesticated until long after that.
Oh, yeah, I know. I agree too, but they had to have a core plant. They had to eat something. You know what I mean? It was especially in the desert.
That's the thing. It was assumed that they were hunter-gatherers at that time. So I don't know if there's any evidence found otherwise that suggests, that they had crops or anything like that.
I would think that they must, well, maybe not crops, but like almost like a flock of birds or whatever. Birds as a species will go when they know the huckleberry trees are in bloom, and they'll go and they'll eat all the huckleberries off that tree. Maybe they were like that, but then why do you need these massive structures? See, that's always been the contradiction, is a nomadic culture wouldn't build these, wouldn't bother. But then
That's exactly,
we don't really know what they were thinking. We don't know what they're thinking.
Well, that's exactly right. But the other problem is that the labor that is required to produce these things, you don't get out of hunter-gatherer societies. When you look at Egypt.
Unless you're really good hunter-gatherers and your population increases, and now you have.
That doesn't seem possible.
Labor.
It doesn't seem possible. It didn't seem that our understanding is that until you have not just crop, but massive organized like you did in Egypt, and then you're able to have the surplus labor. Because you're building
surplus labor. That's huge.
So you don't have that until you get well into the agricultural age. So how did they do this back then? It's a huge mystery. No one really knows and they even, for some reason, after they built these, they would have spent hundreds or thousands of years building these things up. For some reason, they buried them. And that's why they're buried.
See, that has always struck me as very strange, and it makes me sort of question the archaeologists. Like, are you sure? Because it sounds so weird. But I guess, think of the labor involved in burying it. Doesn't that just seem ridiculous?
It involved thousands of men taking dozens or hundreds of years, because just they can look at the amount of cubic meters of sand and debris that was used or whatever, and you can calculate how many people, how many man hours and stuff. And I don't have it in front of me, but it's a lot. And it's like, how could a hunter-gatherer society have that level of organization and surplus labor to do that? It doesn't make sense. So
honestly, I don't know how any large civilization could exist without. It doesn't have to be modern agriculture, obviously, but at least you're living off of nuts and fruits and vegetables. As far as it's probably far more in grains being the most important one, I'm sure. I don't know how you do that if you're nomadic, unless you're doing what I said, unless you're hopping from this is where they're ripe this time of year or whatever. It is fascinating. I still don't get why they'd bother building the thing, but all right.
Well, that's the mystery of it. It was obviously it was hugely important to them for some reason, and that's what it's such a it's hard to understand.
What always made me a little worried about that one you're talking about, Tepley. What is it called? The full name?
Gobekli Tepley or Gobekli Tepley.
Yeah, that one. Okay. I always thought they might have the time wrong on that. I've never really looked at it. Do they really have the date on that right?
Yeah, nobody's disputing. I'm not sure what it's.
What?
It's never been disputed, so I don't believe. I think they can. I'm just guessing. I don't really know this for a fact, but they can look at, say, charcoal residue from the time.
Yeah, that's a big thing. Charcoal residue.
Yeah, so you can carbon date that. And
so I guess they really know it was 10,000 years ago. So 6,000 years or 5,000 years before the pyramids are built. That's just, to me. That's crazy. That's almost as impressive as the 75,000 year ago. What I mean? Maybe 10,000 years ago, but then to completely disappear. And how did they? So they would have. So 10,000 years ago, Neanderthals still walking the earth?
No.
Nah. So they wouldn't have had a competing hominid.
Bigfoot was around, but
what's that?
Bigfoot was around, but
of course, there's always Gigantopithecus lurking in the background. But so wow, that again, that's why people spend their entire career, studying places like that and still come up with no fucking answers. They come up with theories and hypotheses.
Yeah, they should. But much of it is still buried. They know that it's there, the mounds, and they can kind of look at it, but they're so careful about unearthing it that, it's not like Lara Croft Tomb Raider. Now it's all very, taking things off layer by layer by layer, so.
Yeah, so that's one of the reasons archaeology annoys me is because I know, and I've thought about going on some of these amateur, you go for a weekend and you dig up some things like the Arrowhead. It's because they know places that are rich in fossils. Usually it's like broken shells, but they're fossilized. But I don't want to go because I've seen the videos on YouTube and they literally have dental picks and toothpicks and cotton balls. And I'd be fucking taking a hammer. Fuck.
Exactly.
I wouldn't be able to do it. I think I have the
down there, please.
What the fuck? There might be a Tyrannosaurus under here.
I'm sorry, son. You'll have to wait 32 years. Okay. All right. Well, I'm leaving.
Scratch. It's like pulling it off grain by grain. Not
Before we switch to the topic that you are an expert on in Cape Cod lore, tonight's episode is sponsored by Yingling.
Oh, all right. And we're going to take a brief commercial break on that so I can run to the men's room. Is that okay?
I can do that. I have the technology.
Fill time for 30 seconds. A minute. All right, I'll be back.
Okay, we're back. Tom, feeling much better.
Yeah, so, just a quick break.
One of the things that we've been interested in on some other parts of the show and our investigation is the Native American legend, mythical beast or mythical spirit, depending on how you look at it, the Wendigo or Wendigo. I'm not sure what's the most proper way to pronounce it. Do you know? Or
I've always called it Wendigo, and okay. I think that's the way they pronounce it on an X-Files episode. There was actually mentioned one time on X-Files. I've read about it in ghost story books and shit like that, but I believe it was actually referenced on that show. It might have even been the title of the episode. I'll have to look it up. And ever since then, I've felt confirmed that it's Wendigo. But who knows?
So Tom has always Tom's mom owns a cottage on Cape Cod in Massachusetts, which also has naturally some very ancient Native American populations there. But he's always talked about a lesser known creature. I remember hearing him talk about this years ago that I had never heard of. So he's going to tell us about that. What is this mythical? Is it a cryptid or?
Because I tried to do a little research and it's not even mentioned by the name I know it as. I have to find the actual hardcover book because online there's really nothing. If any of your viewers could find anything, it's called the Wamagemiswak. I'm going to say WAMAGEMESWAC, something around those lines. It's just, like I said, it's in a hard print book that's 700 miles away. I can't look at it. Wamagemiswak. And this was
sounds like a Jay Giles song.
I know, it's a weird name, but which is probably why it stuck with me. So we read this story as kids, at the Cape doing the campfire stories, and this was in one of the books, and we'd hear it, and it was based on a legend by I'm going to say Wampanoag Indians, but it could have been the Algonquins. It could have been, they were all clustered up there right around that time. And this is a myth that they existed among their culture before white men arrived so it wasn't like our interpretation of what they were telling us. It was what they would pass down to through their own generations long before they knew it. So the idea is, and this now, if you're out at night, right, you're in the woods, these are very specific things, and you've done something bad, right? There's this creature, spirit creature, whatever you'd call it. I would call it a chimera. It was very large mouth, almost like a wolf's mouth. It would kill you. It would be, a vicious fucking monster in the woods. But it's the scariest part was it could turn sideways and be invisible, be razor thin. So like you could never see it. And it was like, it was just an amazingly complex myth.
I used to be like that.
What's that?
I used to be like that.
Yeah, you could turn like that. But yeah, so it would turn like that and basically be invisible and be able to move and then get to you and grab it. And like I said, there's not a lot I can find on it. And my brother says sometimes he calls it the Wackagemiswak, but I'm pretty sure it started Wham with WAM. So if anyone wants to look it up or anyone's heard any variations of this large-mouthed shapeshifter, essentially, it's a shapeshifter that this legend, please let me know. Because who knows? That may be one of those good ways to teach a lesson to kids. You know what I mean? Don't go in there because even if you don't see it, it's going to hurt you. You know what I mean? Like, because that's why half of these.
Or don't go in there if you're thinking bad. What was it? You said it was thinking bad thoughts.
You had to have done something bad, or you had to have been running away from something. You had to. Yeah. There was a moral component to it. Even like in the Indian universe, there was like a moral to the tale sort of thing. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I always thought that was. But now, speaking of the Cape, and I don't know how many people, some of you are familiar with it, some of you aren't. remember I mentioned this to you years ago when we went down there, that when the Pilgrims landed, the literally the first batch, like Miles Standish and his crew of like 6, I guess, on the small boat, they found a grave with a blonde-haired male and a young child's skeleton in it. Do you remember me telling you about that?
Yeah.
That, I think, is one of the more fascinating, but it's a mystery that has no answer because nobody knows about it. It's just jotted down in like Governor Bradford's book or something. Discovered grave, dug it up, found however they described him. But obviously, blonde hair was a big part of it, and there was no blonde hair in North America.
Now, I wonder why they dug it up. Like, was there a cross?
No, because the Indians would hide their corn and all their grains and stuff. Yeah. They would bury them. And the Pilgrims stole. The first thing the Pilgrims did when they got here, ashamed to say it, is they dug up these mounds, realized these are what these people are storing their vegetables, like squash or whatever it was, in, and they took them all back to the boat. So I think when they found this, obviously there's no cross on it or anything, they probably thought it was just another, beans or corn. Yeah. And instead they found I can't remember any more description than a blonde-haired adult and a young child's skeleton.
Now, how long do you think hair buried underground like that would remain intact enough where you could still recognize it?
I have no idea. I rarely dig up graves. And when I do, I try to avoid looking them in the face. No, I think.
Well, you might want to think about keeping the hair if you dig up the next grave.
No, what's that?
I said, if you dig up a grave, you might want to think about keeping the hair.
I do think that hair does last a long time because it's made of isn't it made of a version of the same thing your fingernails are made of? What the hell is the term? I think hair lasts longer than flesh, certainly. Not longer than bone, but longer than flesh. So
is that collagen or is that something? I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah, there you go. Right?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
No, it's not that, but it begins with
C. Something similar to that. I don't know.
I don't know. Again, viewers, if there are any, fucking look it up. Tell us. I have no idea.
I'm just thinking as far, it is fascinating, the idea of finding the grave there. But my guess, there were, so Plymouth was 1620. So this is basically 120 years after the discovery of America. So, or a little more than that. So, there's explorers and settlers going all around the coast during that period.
Oh yeah, there were. There was just nobody thought New England was very attractive. See, we were a bad place.
Right.
That's why. Yeah, they started down in Cuba, Hispaniola, and Florida, and then moved their way up.
Right.
And apparently, this. I guess I'm telling you. The Indians would see like Spanish and French and British sailing like fishing vessels out catching, cod or whatever.
Yeah.
And they had no fucking idea what they were. They literally had no idea because those people would never land. But I guess this one, maybe there was.
I'm sure some of them did. They were. There had to be looking for treasure, looking for gold. I mean, the Spanish were taking in gold by the tons at that already for 100 years at that point. So
they're just not recorded. We don't know the names of the boats.
Yes.
We do with Columbus and the Mayflower. We just because they went off to the sea and disappeared, never came back. Never told a story.
I remember reading about the settling of Boston, which was a few years after this. So, but I remember there was this guy, or there was this European already living there, known as the Hermit, who and he was forced to move inland. As the Puritans came in. So I mean,
you've told me that story. You've told me that. Yeah, you told me that story, right?
Probably, yeah. But there were people living here. There were Europeans that lived here and that landed here. So, like for instance, when you hear the Blonde Age, you're thinking, "Oh, could this go back to the Vikings?" But I don't think
that was that was the point. The person whoever wrote the more fantastical account of it was after who referenced Bradford's diary entry was that this is proof that it was the Vikings because of the blonde hair.
But that would be about 500 years. So I have a hard time imagining that hair would be intact, buried in the ground, buried just in the dirt like that, not even in a coffin.
Yeah, it doesn't. It probably eventually some sort of parasitic insect or something would have found a way to devour it.
Yeah. So, but I mean, it's still interesting. Are you a believer in the Vikings exploring?
Yeah, I'm a believer in them getting to North America. I believe they've been to North America. I just don't believe some of the more ridiculous claims that they've been to like Pennsylvania and like central Canada and shit. I mean, sometimes I'm like, I don't know.
Minnesota.
Yes.
There's a whole theory on that. Yeah, Minnesota. Like, wow.
I mean, yeah, it makes sense. I mean, it's a lot shorter. They can make it here. They could sail. They could make it here. Why wouldn't they? Yeah. But, I mean, whether they ever settled or they never established a civilization, right? They're probably looking for something to loot or plunder. And they're like, oh, fuck, it's a bunch of pine trees and crabs. The fuck? We don't need anything here.
It must have looked a lot nicer than Greenland, though, where they did.
Yeah, I've never understood why. That was another reason that I've sort of been skeptical about that a little bit. Is once you found this place, why wouldn't you stay there? Because it was get your people and settle it like the Pilgrims did.
Because
I think in Virginia.
Well, I think the reason. Well, first of all, I think it is established now, or at least very well accepted, that they did reach Newfoundland.
Yes, I think that I buy that. I do buy that. Yeah,
so they did reach North America. If you count, I think that would count as North America. But I think the reason they would have had a hard time maintaining the colony is when they had their settlements in Greenland, which lasted for centuries, right? There was constant trade traffic back and forth to Europe. That's
what they were good at. That's the only way they kept going.
Yeah. So, but that would have been that much harder going from, in those primitive ships to have a regular trading route going from North America across the Atlantic. That would have been probably too much for what the technology at the time.
Maybe. Although now I think about it, remarkably enough, when you think about this, is that the biggest export we had from the colonies, even before they were officially colonies, just from fucking North America, it was timber. Remember that?
Yeah.
Do you remember? So literally just wood was in such demand because Europe had exploded. They had cities now. They literally had 1 million people living in London or something ridiculously beyond that. So it's not simple, but it seems to me like you go over to Maine and be like, fuck, we got, 80-foot pine trees everywhere. Let's just make this our living. But
at the time of the Vikings, that wouldn't have been the same issue. At the time of the European settlement, they had already they were using up all the tall trees.
Yeah, all the good the lodge poles.
For their big ships. But at the time of the Viking age, there would have been no lack of wood in Europe.
What do you consider the Viking age?
From say like late 800s, 900 to say for another 200 years after that.
Okay. That's why I never really thought about it, but that sounds about right. Before Europe really had their organized armies going and they actually even had navies. Yeah. So I'll run that by Allison. She probably has a good point because they used to, they would always raid Paris and shit like that. So she probably knows because they would steal, archaeological shit like.
Oh no, I'm pretty close on the dates. I mean, I follow history very closely, and they were for instance, Moscow was originally a Viking colony, and so
I've heard that probably from you. Somebody said that to me before.
Yeah.
I never looked into it.
The Rus were Vikings.
That's right, the Rus. I heard this in history class.
Yeah,
that's history class.
Yeah,
I remember that.
Yeah, so they traded and settled, very far and wide. They conquered Sicily. So
did you ever? Did I ever share you this story, or did you ever share with me? We may have talked about this. The Vikings. This is probably near the end of their ages of power. So 1200, we'll say 1100, whatever it was. They sailed down, I'm going to say the Seine, I know it was into France, I'm pretty sure, current day France. And the French surrendered. Do you remember this story? And the Vikings said, okay, just give us a tax, like a 10% of what we would have stolen, and nobody gets killed, nobody gets hurt. And so they did. They would give them tribute. And this would happen more than once a year. And one time they came down and they invited all the French people, oh God, I'm going to fuck this up, onto their ships, like to do the exchange, and then hung them all from trees and said, we'll be back and take everything next year.
No, I didn't hear that. That seems pretty short-sighted.
I know, because that made, I got to find him. Somebody out there is listening. Look that up. River, France, Vikings, hanging people from trees. I don't know if they but somehow they convinced them that they were cool with it, like just taking, a little bit, and then just fucking killed them all. They're like, yeah, not anymore. We're just gonna take everything we want.
I mean, they did eventually settle, like Normandy is that's all Viking. William the Conqueror, William the Normandy. These are all Viking descendants. So they mixed in, and I guess they've apparently done some pretty good studies of the DNA of Vikings. They were not by any means all blonde and tall and blue-eyed. They were these populations were all mixing and quite a bit. So a lot of that stuff is myth, but it's cool myth though.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's art, it's artistic representation. If you're gonna represent like Michael Jordan, or if you're gonna represent an African American, you could do a picture of Michael Jordan. It's 1100. It's 1100 AD. It's like, okay, it's the ideal human. You know what I mean? Or you want to do whatever. Who's a handsome actor or a beautiful actress? That's who you would use in your art. And but chances are, they didn't all look like that actor who plays Thor with the big muscles and all the hair and all that. They didn't. I'm sure they lived on fucking boats half the time. They probably stunk and were gross.
I think the whole world did back then.
I know, I do too. It's why I've often thought, how cool would it be to go back in time? And I'm like, but I need to be in my own little bubble, like a gerbil ball. So I don't have to enter this shit running down the streets. Your sewer is literally your front yard. Fuck off. I don't need that shit.
Yeah. So did you? I think once before you mentioned that one of the kids, maybe it was one of the kids at that kids camp, was actually a Native American. Did you ever talk to any Native Americans that may have confirmed any of those legends from the area?
God damn it! Yeah,
I think once you did know somebody from back then.
Yeah, who the fuck?
Yeah, we'll come back to you. Do you have any other?
Oh God damn it! God.
You don't have to remember his name. We don't want to get him in trouble or anything. Just I'm curious if you remember anything he told you about any of those legends, or were those tales that their parents told them, or was it just something you read about?
I do. No, I think I was at Camp Kennywood or Camp Marshall. I can't remember. So that means I don't know what age I was. But yeah, somebody did back it up enough that I can't give him any verification info. Sorry. Except that I've heard it multiple times in multiple locations by people who didn't know each other. So exists.
We did an interview on our channel about a month back with a couple of Native American paranormal investigators. They have their own show that's on Discovery Plus and a few other channels. And the thing about the show was, the show, at least in the first 2 seasons that are up, was low budget and kind of cheesy. But the guys seemed pretty cool. But when we had them, when we interviewed them on the show, I thought they were really, really good guests. I mean, they were, I thought that where they kind of were screwing up their own show was they were trying to make it so much like these paranormal shows where you're going into a house and someone's knocking on the roof and you're like, shh, who's there? I didn't think they had to do that, because when they started talking about their culture and their own experiences, that was 1,000 times more interesting to me. They were very authentic, and you could tell they took it very seriously. But so I did go ahead, yeah.
Look, when you say take it seriously, when we're talking about supernatural stuff, that's always when I rudely interrupt. Like, they take it seriously as a legend that's important to retain, to keep their culture intact, or they believe the legend is true. Like, those are, I'm not saying I dismiss it. I'd love some of these legends to be true. But what do you think? I'll have to watch that.
That's actually, it's funny. It really, we in the West, me and you, we have this distinction between true and untrue and natural and supernatural. But for a lot of other cultures, it's not necessarily an either or, because it involves respect for your culture and your traditions. And so for them, respecting.
Yeah, you're freezing up on me. Is your mic okay? You're freezing up.
How am I sounding now? Can you hear me? Oh, yeah, you're frozen on me too.
Okay, I'm moving now. Can you see me and hear me?
Yep.
My internet connection is unstable, it says. I just got a notification. Oh, fuck. I don't know why.
Huh.
All right.
It's the Wendigo. They're getting our system. But these guys, they venerate their traditions and the importance of recognizing the powers of these spirits. It's a gray area between real and not real. You know what I'm saying? In the sense that if you don't respect it, you're also kind of not respecting your culture. But but obviously they do take it seriously too, in terms of, so for instance, one of them has been involved with shamanism, or I'm not sure if you called it that, but involved, he's been brought into that world as a teenager, and he's now probably, I don't know, in his mid-30s or something like that. But he was appointed a guardian of a holy mountain in there, and you could tell it was something that he took, on native lands there from the tribe.
I get that, but that almost reminds me of like being. Now, I'm sure it's far more important. I do not mean to diminish his faith or his commitment to that, but it's like when you're an altar boy, you have dominion over that communion where you carry it from A to B, and it is sacred, quote unquote, right? Catholic. You know what it's like. So is it that sort of thing where, even as a Catholic, I know, dude, they get this shipped in from a special bakery every Tuesday. I'm very aware of that. You know what I mean? It's not actually Jesus' body, but if I were to treat it any differently, then I would be, disrespecting the faith, everyone around me, the church, everything. So it's sort of like that.
There's an element of that, but I do believe that they take seriously the idea that certain places can become, this is the word that I would use, but infected with spiritual problems, and that there are ways to solve that. And now, and one of the things,
spiritual problems, you're gonna have to. I don't get it. I don't get spiritual problems. What do you mean?
There's a restless spirit there that's causing problems.
Like at a physical location?
Yeah. So it could be a house. It could be a bridge, a village, a mountain. There are a spirit or spirits that reside there, that perhaps because they've not been treated with respect, or perhaps because you're polluting the land, give a hoot, don't pollute, all that stuff. For whatever the reason, you've upset these spirits.
Yeah, so I wasn't tracking with what you're saying, but okay, I get what you're saying. All right. Yeah. So a haunted Amityville horror.
Yeah.
Like that sort of thing. Like, okay, I get. Or like there are certain valleys that people go in and never come out of, and they're haunted. Like mountains. Okay. Yeah, I get that. I get that.
And so they take it kind of seriously that they can get called in to help alleviate these problems. Unfortunately, when they take it to the next level in the show, it becomes really cheesy because they've got stupid equipment that is junk. And
the e-meters or whatever.
Yeah. It's all so ridiculous.
Oh my God, we've got activity over here. We've got activity everywhere.
Yeah. One of the guys, they've got like 4 in the group. The 2 that we interviewed were Native Americans. They're brothers, but there are other guys that they've taken into the group. One of them is Japanese, and he wears like some kind of Halloween samurai suit. It's like, this is stupid. If you're gonna respect.
He's wearing what? He's Japanese.
It's like some kind of a. He's actually Japanese, and he's wearing some kind of a samurai suit when they go in their investigations. So those elements were cheesy, but when I just listened to these guys, they were very articulate and really talked about their culture in a very authentic way, but they also, so what I got them to talk about was the Wendigo. And so one of the things that I got them to slowly say, but they were reluctant to say, I said, so can you now with the Wendigo, there are 2 different versions of the legend. One of it is more that it's like a physical being, like a cryptid, kind of like similar to a Bigfoot. but that it
Yeah.
craves human flesh. The other version, which I think is probably the more authentic, is more that it's a spirit that craves, that can maybe possess you, and similar to with the whatchamacallit thing, that
The
there's a
one with
more
Jim and Swag.
yeah, there's a moral
I
aspect to it.
There is to the Wendigo a moral aspect.
Well, there is to the spiritual kind. So if you're greedy, you are more prone to getting possessed by this spirit, and then when you do, now you will become someone who, and it's actually in the American psychiatric dictionary. It's called Wendigo syndrome, and it's when you start craving human flesh. It's
Oh yeah, it's like that. There's actual like human lycanthropy, like people who like I've read. I actually like people act like a werewolf would act, or they act like a Bigfoot would act. They try to eat people.
This is an actual syndrome.
No,
it's a
syndrome.
syndrome.
I'm gonna send you.
Yeah,
I'm gonna send you.
I've seen those where people. I've seen like one person. That can happen. Like anybody. There was a guy that thought he was a cow, and he just, but
Well, the one I most recently saw was crazy. He ended up killing 2 people for no reason. Like totally off his fucking nut. I don't know. All right. Sorry for the distraction. It just rang a bell. But I
remember once for a couple of months I thought I was a stirring straw, but
you probably were.
Yeah.
I think I remember a version of the Wendigo as a spirit that had no. I know you mentioned there were 2, but I think, or maybe I'm thinking of a different mythological creature that would like turn into the wind and then like blow up your nose or something, and then you become possessed by it. Does that ring a bell with you? That would like literally be the wind.
That sounds like the Wendigo.
Yeah, I know it does. Wow, what a punster you are! Gee,
you walked into it.
No, but seriously, there was one that like, I gotta get back up to the Cape and grab all these books. I didn't bring as many home.
And the Wendigo is not from Cape Cod Indians. That would have been the Algonquin and stuff like that. So from Pennsylvania.
The Algonquins did come down.
Okay, this would have been like more from the but I'm sure there's legends. They're not that far away, so it was more like northern Pennsylvania to southern Canada, those regions. But that way was a widespread enough belief. But so what I got these guys to admit was that under certain, yes, you could weaponize spirits. So like, let's say you had let's say you had a village and someone wanted to build on your land and you wanted to stop it. You could, in theory, call on a Wendigo, the spirit, and it could create some problems.
All right, that sounds like. The difference between superstition and faith is whatever you choose, right?
Yeah.
And it sounds, so.
Right.
No, it's interesting. It's cool to hear.
Yeah.
I don't know, like how to factor it into my understanding of the world.
No, it's obvious. I don't think you or I believe in any of that stuff, but just as an interesting way of dissecting legends and
I think it's. I believe in dissecting it. Absolutely. I believe in looking at them. I think it's fascinating. And even if one of the 1,000 of crazy theories we've seen, like on In Search Of, or any of these like supernatural, preternatural things, turns out to be true, it's mind blowing. You know, it is. If any of them, if one of them turns out to be real, that would just be fascinating. And
so of all those old In Search Of episodes, all these supernatural, paranormal myths or creatures, which one do you think is most likely to possibly be true?
A version of the Loch Ness monster. Not in Loch Ness. I don't believe that creature exists there. But I do believe that the ocean is the most likely habitat for something we've never, ever seen before. Now, it doesn't mean I believe it's going to be exactly the fucking Diplodocus that we saw in our history books way back when. Or
Plesiosaurus, right? Isn't that the one?
Plesiosaurus. Yeah, I'm not saying it's going to be exactly like that, like what we pictured from their bones. But, we all know the story of the coelacanths. We all know that it was thought to be extinct for millions of years, and they started pulling them up off of South Africa, and there's one sitting in Boston right now. So that is my best one. My biggest hope, though, is Bigfoot. My best odds are the Loch Ness monster, just a large prehistoric creature we didn't know existed before. Like whale, it has to be whale size or bigger. If they find a new fish that's a foot long, I don't give a fuck. I really don't. It has to be impressive in size to, even if we thought it was extinct. Like the coelacanth is halfway there because it's got the legs. But the Bigfoot is what I would like to be true. That I would love to be true. Like, I don't care if it's in Canada or in Nepal, wherever they find it. If they find one, hey, you're breaking up.
Oh, sorry. I was trying to pull up a, that's because that's my fault. This time I opened up Internet Explorer. It's going to open up 1,000 things. Fuck it. I wanted to open up an article for you. Can you still hear me?
I can hear you, but it's a delay, and I don't think you heard me. Did you hear me while I was speaking?
Yes. You told me I was breaking up. I wanted to. All right. I guess I'm not gonna be able to open this now. But there was recently an interview with Jane Goodall. You remember her, of course, right?
Yeah.
I didn't even know she was still around, but she.
I saw this interview. Go on.
Yeah, about Bigfoot. Did you see that?
No. I saw that she had done one, and I was shocked that she was still alive. Alltales posted to it or something. One of those sites did it. I'm like, that can't be the Jane Goodall I'm thinking of. But I didn't. So tell me what was in there.
Oh, she was open to the idea. She doesn't rule out the idea not that Bigfoot could still exist. She was careful what she said. It was hard to tell if she was just trying to be respectful to people that have beliefs, but it's obviously too that she had asked these questions to native populations. She mentioned Ecuador. I don't really normally think of that as Bigfoot country, but she mentioned that she had asked, isolated native, people that she talked to, if they had seen something similar, and they talked about an upright monkey without a tail, or something similar to that effect, that was 6 feet tall or something like that they saw. And she also mentioned too that she didn't think that it was impossible that Neanderthal could be alive somewhere.
I actually entertained that theory that Neanderthals could be alive somewhere. I had one after I read a few books about Neanderthals way back when I worked at Tatnick, when I lived in Worcester.
We have plenty in Worcester.
Yeah, no, but I remember I read there was a fiction book, poorly written but kind of fun, called Neanderthal.
Yeah,
you remember it? It hit the best. I'm sure it hit the bestseller list, but it was crap. But then after that, because it was a bestseller, it sort of sparked articles in magazines like Scientific American, probably Discover, thing like, what were Neanderthals? Like, literally, let's break down those things you broke down, like DNA way. Like, where do we separate from them? How different are they? What's the possibility some of them still exist? And I was fascinated. I'm like, dude, there's got to be some fucking valley somewhere, or like some mountaintop somewhere where there's like. But then the thing that kills it is that you need a sustaining population, which would have to expand or eventually die. You know what I mean? Unless they're like reptiles and they can have intercourse with their own relations without developing all sorts of genetic defects. But you know what I mean? You need like a large population to live for a long time. Yeah. So I don't know.
No, and it's like the question that I've always, that certainly over the last, say, 20 years, when it seems like everybody's got a camera and you got drones up there, you're like, well, why is it's been all this time, why hasn't there been a good picture? Why hasn't there been a corpse found? But I say that as someone who has spent all my life living in cities, has never visited, say, the vast forests of the Pacific or anything like that. But so when I look at Jane Goodall saying that, she would, I would assume, have an idea. She would be asking those same questions. Why hasn't anybody found that evidence? And she would know, or have a better sense than I do, how much space those creatures would need to hide in, or to be in and not be discovered. So that was what was intriguing.
Yeah, so I guess that lends it a little bit, but the odds, and I think one of the Rogan guests who's into cryptids or whatever was mentioned this, and it's something that's always bugged me too, is that no matter how elusive you are, or whatever, eventually you get hit by a truck, or eventually some hiker stumbles across your skeleton. It's
exactly.
just so, I mean, all you need is one example of that and everything is cool. But it's like just the idea, and he goes to weird hunting places in like Utah and Wyoming, hunts fucking bison and elk or whatever the fuck he does. And he goes to crazy places and he talks to people because he's interested in that weird shit. And it's like, nah, none of the real people have ever seen anything. The people in the paper, they've seen a few things, but the people he talks to are like, no, fuck no. They see mountain lions. They got real threats to worry about, bears and lions. And shit. So.
That's how I feel about it too. But again, I say that as someone who's never spent time up there. So playing devil's advocate, I guess I could say, all right, so you're Joe Rogan and you spend some time, you're talking to a few dozen people that are also hunters. If you've got a small but sustainable population of some kind of hominid that's living up deep in the mountains, that doesn't mean that those particular people that Joe Rogan has talked to would have seen something, because there certainly are at least enough other people that it's hard to evaluate what their credibility is. I don't know.
Well, I would think now, thinking about population density, I would think that Siberia, and there have been reports of weird shit out there. It's one of those places, probably in Mongolia, where literally the population is all in like 5 cities. What I mean? It's not like spread out, or the the central part of Australia. Those are places where weird shit could exist. And literally, you might not see a person for 10 years if you could survive in those environments.
Right.
I don't like kind of creature could do that. But I mean, literally having nobody, I mean, we've had firearms and cameras for over a century.
Yeah.
Somebody would have seen a Bigfoot or shot it or got a good picture of it, not counting the guy in the monkey suit.
And everybody has a camera on their phone now, and everybody has a phone.
Yes.
So
So I mean, like I said, it started being possible 100, 150 years ago, whatever. But now it's almost automatic. Like nobody's going to see anything like that and not get a picture of it.
I did have a guy recently tell me his personal story with Bigfoot.
His what?
His personal encounter with Bigfoot. Jane doesn't like Bigfoot.
I know. Jane will take on a Bigfoot. She don't give a fuck. She's tough. She's chased a herd of deer. There were 7 deer, as far as I know. It's hard to tell. They're a little ahead of us. And a couple of them had big racks of antlers. And she, good Lord, she's faster than a bullet. She spread these deer all out over this pasture. They panicked. They were jumping 5 feet in the air when she was like 20 feet behind them. And then they finally all dispersed totally. And I kept calling her, and she finally came back without getting to them. But holy fuck, Jesus. If I was a Neanderthal, I'd want her as a hunting dog. But anyway.
maybe they were the ones that first bred that breed.
Maybe they were, the Cane Corso. It's a war dog.
So anyways, I interviewed a whole bunch of people that were interested in signing up for the podcast, and I interviewed this guy who had just moved with his family to, I think it was Colorado, but he had come from Western Pennsylvania, and so it wasn't an elaborate story, but we were just talking about stuff. He didn't want to even come on the show to tell his story. He just wanted to become part of the podcast. And it ended up, he ended up not being able to do that because it just a personal situation with his family. It sounded like things were kind of rough economic wise, and they had a house full of kids, and his wife just didn't want him doing it. And he was like,
we don't have to worry about his troubles. He might watch this. Good luck.
No. And I'm not saying anything, I'm not saying his name anyways. But so anyways, he was saying, and it was in Pennsylvania, and he was, I don't remember all the details, but wherever he was in a semi-wooded, fieldy kind of area. And from where he could see, there was a small stream. And to say the right of that was a bunch of kids playing. I don't know if it was a playground where there were kids there. And he looked.
A reasonable assumption, Kev.
Well,
I mean, it doesn't have to. If they're playing it, it's a playground.
I was once a kid. I played a lot. I've never played on a playground. I mean,
No,
but
we
anyways.
never did either. Everything was a playground.
Yeah. So, anyways, he looks down and he sees this creature that he says is tall and hairy and loping in long strides, and it gets down to the creek, if I say it properly from Pennsylvania terms, and walks through the creek, just keeps walking across the other side and just goes a little more further up and
How
disappears.
old was he at the time?
This happened like a year or two ago. So he was probably
he was an adult.
Yeah.
When you mentioned the playground of the kids, I'm picturing him as a kid.
Well, the reason I add that element was because he told the story to me that way. And so this is why all these stories end up being a little bit strange. So I said to him, so the Bigfoot was heading in the direction of the kids? And he said, yeah, more or less. I said, and you didn't feel worried about the kids. You saw this giant wild animal walking towards children. And he goes, I don't know. I just didn't sense. He goes, I didn't sense that it was dangerous and it had any ill intentions. And sure enough, it just went off into the woods. And so I said, well, did you go down and look for footprints or anything? He said, no. So I'm just like, I believed he was telling me the truth and he sounded normal and everything like that. But what do you do with stories like that? I mean, to me,
how do you not go look for prints? That would be the first thing you do. He went through a creek. He definitely stepped in mud. If it existed, you would actually have a print. I look at prints every time we hike. I always look. That's a deer. That's a raccoon. That's a turtle. That's a blah blah.
And I see a tall, hairy creature heading for a playground of children. I'm like, shit, someone's going to sound the alarm down there.
Yeah.
I mean,
that's weird.
But then, I don't. And then look, and this is, I don't believe any of this stuff. So please keep in mind. But a lot of these stories, whether it comes to aliens or Bigfoots, seems to involve a psychic aspect of it where it impacts their mind. They're more than just frozen with fear. They have certain feelings that come over them that are completely irrational to you and I looking at it. It just doesn't make sense. So, which now you can interpret that to me in two basic ways. My interpretation of that is what you had is similar to a waking dream.
I was just going to say, that was the first thing. So it's like a waking, what do they call it? Lucid dreaming, vivid dreaming. Well, lucid, I think, is the word most people use. Yeah. Where you can actually still, in your dream, you're functioning and doing all these things, and you can change the narrative and all that. Yeah. But it hits it, you can't choose to do that. You don't choose to do that.
And in a dream, some of your, in a dream, some of your emotional reactions to things or your understanding of a situation are way different than they would be if you were actually awake. So, so in a dream, you could see an alien and you might have totally different thoughts, even irrational thoughts that would be different. So now he's not dreaming if he's out and he's not in his bed. He's out, but could you could, in theory, have an episode or something, right? I guess.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, we know. I know for a fact you could have hallucinatory episodes brought on by stress, mental illness, or just even fucking dehydration or weird drugs. I mean, there's all
gummy bears.
What's that?
Gummy bears.
What?
Gummy bears.
They'll do it. But yeah, I mean that does happen. So I don't think it kills his credibility. It's weird that he didn't follow up on it. God, I would have done that.
Well, yeah, and
I would have been trail of that fucking thing.
And that's why to me that so many of those stories and alien stories the same way, they have that dream quality to them. And so you're left with either the creature or the aliens are having some effect on your mind, or it's a dreaming situation or something similar to. And so you and I would lean towards the dreaming situation, but if you're not going to, if you don't want to rule anything out, I guess you'd have to find supporting evidence. So if you had an experience like that, and then you went down the next day and you found 9 foot, 9 or 19-inch footprints or something like that, not 9 foot, but you know what I'm saying? So, I mean, you'd have to have
That
some
would
kind
be
of,
cool.
Yeah.
That guy would be hard to miss. The guy with a 9-foot feet. You're not
We-
going to
we-
get
we-
a lot of those guys.
we could use him on the
Well-
Celtics.
Yeah. Hell, we could use them on the Patriots. Just fucking foot everybody. Just foot your way down the field. Oh, by the way, the Patriots are playing tonight. I don't know if you heard.
Yeah. Any predictions?
Okay, much like Loch Ness Monster and Bigfoot, I've got predictions and I've got hopes. They're not the same. So prediction, we lose to Tampa Bay. Hope, we beat Tampa Bay and, you know, ride off victorious with what would be probably one of our biggest non-postseason wins ever. It really would be. You know what I mean? Non-postseason. I'm not even talking about playoffs. Never mind Super Bowls.
Any
But
chance
seriously,
it'll be a close game?
yeah, there's a I was so pissed that James White is gone. He's the kind of guy who helps a game like this, man.
Yeah.
Do they have another James White?
Well, they got this kid, JJ Taylor, who had a really good preseason and I really like. But he is someone that could be a future James White, and I think he might play a role in this game. And the problem is James White took about 3 years to become James White.
I know. He was a utility guy. He was basically a utility guy, and then he became the go-to guy.
Because he's got to be a lot smarter than just a back that you hand the ball off to. He's got to be the guy that's picking up blitzes and, you know, the quarterback in their system. He's coming in on third down, and there's a lot of audibles involved. He's got to, you know.
So this guy is not going to be up to James White. He's not going to be.
No, I wouldn't think so.
I don't know. Then we're going to need somebody to have Max Jones, maybe would be nice, but I don't want to put it all on him. Somebody to have the game of their life, maybe on defense. Maybe we're hitting them with sacks. You know, you do that a couple of times, we got a chance. You know, they don't have Gronk. I mean, we don't have James White, but they don't have Gronk. But they've got every other good offensive player in the league.
That's a more than fair trade.
I know. They've literally got every other NFL MVP on their offense, or all-star, all-pro, whatever.
What do you think of Mac Jones so far?
I think I've told you I've only been able to listen to 2 of the games, so I'm really going by reading and listening. I'm going to watch tonight, obviously. I go often by what Jerry Callahan says because he does watch the games. He breaks them down briefly. Good enough for me. I have to say I'm happy with him because he doesn't suck. He's better than Cam Newton, which sucks that Cam Newton fell off the cliff so fast. I'm fine with Mac Jones. This game will tell me a lot more. Right? I mean, how do you judge a guy after 3 games?
No,
you
you can't. There has to be.
So generally, I'm pleased, I guess.
I think you're looking for growth. You know, you're not looking for the guy to be Tom Brady. You're looking the guy to show he's picking things up. For me, I think one of the problems that they're having, obviously, the offensive line has been a huge problem, which makes it really hard for Mac Jones to function because the offensive line has been atrocious. And obviously, there are problems with penalties and things like that. But for me, one of the things that I see happening is that, you know, they teach these guys to go through you've heard this term, their progressions, right? So you drop back in the pocket and you've got a series of
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever.
Exactly. And you go in that order. But what's happening is that other teams know this, and they know the way the Patriots play it is that he's going to drop back and he's going to make a quick decision. That's what he's good at. But they're using that against him. So because they know what his progressions are, and they know once he looks off A and B and C, they know where he's going. And so they very quickly swarm to that spot. So I don't know how, you have to adjust to that by being a little bit more flexible.
Yeah, though that's something that they can do. That's something the Patriots should be able to do.
Exactly.
You got to be able to counter their counter.
Yeah.
And that's why tonight's kind of important. Even though Mac Jones and Tom Brady aren't playing against each other, they're playing against their respective defenses. And we don't expect Mac Jones to be Tom Brady. It would just be nice to see that we had an offense that matched theirs, theirs. Yeah. That at least could keep up, and make the smart decisions, make the reads, Like, make the corrections, like at halftime or whatever, from the sideline. Fuck that. Go with 3. You know, go fucking Indiana left. Or some stupid call that they never make. Just do it.
So we'll wrap it up with one more question about that. Have you heard anything?
Yeah, we're on to football from you. No, we didn't touch UFOs, but we've been to Loch Ness Monster, ancient societies, and football. Okay, go on. Neanderthals too. Never. They always get the short.
So no, still on the NFL. So did you hear anything about Seth Wickersham's book? Has Callahan interviewed him or anything? Or have you heard any of the interviews?
No. Callahan had read excerpts of it and will have read it by tomorrow's. He does a YouTube show in the morning. I believe he will have read it by then. He was giving some quotes from it on his show the other day on Thursday, because on Fridays it's only fans. Like you have to pay his Friday one. So there was some shit about, was it about John Henry or was it Robert Kraft? I can't remember. He was talking about different things. What are you bringing up?
Oh, well, so when we were coming back from Mass General Hospital the other day, they were doing an interview on Christian Fourier and Merloni's show, but it was there was it was actually a really good interview, and there's some really interesting stuff coming out. So for instance, apparently I may have the year wrong, but I think it was 2016 or possibly 17. Supposedly Belichick went into with Kraft and said, we have a trade for Tom Brady. We have a trade offer for him. And Kraft said no. Now, again, that was one of the more things that people can be skeptical about, because it just doesn't seem like
that's the head coach. Is that how trades work in the NFL? I didn't think it was you talk to the head coach first. I would think you would talk to an executive when you're talking about trades.
No, I'm saying Belichick. Belichick is the one that went into Kraft.
Yeah, but he said that. So Belichick said that he was approached about a trade.
Somebody from another organization approached them. Belichick is the GM too, so somebody approached.
Okay, yeah. No, there you go. That's right. I was thinking it was his head coach capacity. That seemed weird, but
no, he is the GM. Right. GM. And Wickersham didn't know what the offer was or from what team, so just that somebody had approached them, and he wouldn't have taken it if the story's true. He would not have taken that offer to Kraft unless he wanted to make the trade. But I think that's the kind of thing that can become, he doesn't really want to make the trade.
Who was it for?
That was not revealed. Didn't reveal who, any of that. But that was in when they had Jimmy G in the wings, and they won 2 Super Bowls after that. So interesting. That was an interesting.
It would have been a bad move. I mean, I would have been a bad move. Obviously, it was a bad move to get rid of him. He's worth every dollar that Patriots throw at him. It's a bad move to get rid of him.
Yeah. No, so I tend to really discount that particular. I'm not saying that Wickersham is lying.
Oh, I'm sure he gets offers, but maybe it was somebody he knows and he promised him, I'll
and it's like you could go in and just you're sharing it over a beer with Bob Kraft, and you're saying, by the way, we got an offer on Tom, and that can get exaggerated down the road, I mean, because it makes sense. There's no reason they get offers, especially where they had Jimmy G in the wings. There was let's see what else was in there. They talked about how bad things were in that last year. Tom Brady was ready to walk out of camp, and Kraft was the one that really had to step in and get them to play one more season. But it was all about Brady wanted, as far as anybody can tell, Brady was serious that he wanted to play until he was 45. And Belichick was looking at the numbers and saying, no quarterback's ever done that. A quarterback starts going down around 36 years old. And so I think Belichick was just, we've got the replacement in Jimmy G here. Let's move on before it's too late. So I do think that's how Belichick's thinking was. I don't think it was personal on his part, but I think it was very personal on Tom's part, because he felt he was entitled to stay as long as he wanted, which maybe that's right. He won a lot of championships. So I think that's.
And he could have, they released him. He could have signed if the Patriots had offered him. if they, you know what I mean? He
wanted a long-term deal, and they weren't going to offer him.
I know. So they could have. Yeah, the Patriots failed. They did. The team, they fucked it up. Whether it was Bill, I guess it was Bill, or Bob, well, whoever, or Jonathan, probably Bill. They fucked up. I mean, what are you going to do?
Well, I think it was more Bill, but Bill's position was reasonable. This guy can't play till he's 45. You know?
And that's why I think the idea that there's a lot of hard feelings is probably overblown. Not that you're going there, but I've seen a lot of articles like, oh, Brady versus Belichick. I don't think that's true. Even when they talk and they do their little, boilerplate interviews, it doesn't ring fake. They actually do love the fact they spent 20 years together because they did have fucking great careers out of it.
Yeah.
Both of them love it. So it's not like they're pretending. So,
I think Wickersham actually came across as a really bright guy to me, and pretty fair.
Oh, no, I've read one of his books. He's written a previous book, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He's written some very about Spygate and stuff. So
yeah. I've read some of his books.
Yeah, and some of those articles I do think were nonsense, but anyways, the way he kind of described the relationship was both things are true. He said, I think that there was a lot of animosity there and bad blood, but that deep down, but not just between Brady and Belichick, but between Kraft and Belichick. And because Belichick is a very difficult guy. But he said,
I love that guy.
And he said, but at the end of the day, I think that bad blood is from what it comes from, excuse me, from working together for that long. That's just a part of the nature of things. But that deep down, there's a love there too that will always be there. So, and like some of the biggest fights you have are with people that you're close to. It's not from some stranger. It's from someone that you've known all your life, And I think that's there was an interesting line. Belichick, Kraft often would refer to other owners, talk to Belichick as an asshole, and because he just the way he kept everything secret, wouldn't tell anybody anything. So one time somebody asked him, "What would it take for you to fire Belichick?" And Kraft had a beautiful answer: 8-8.
Seriously, they had the greatest run in NFL history together, including Kraft in that. The greatest owner that we have ever had, most teams have ever had. No team, very few teams have owners like that, like him, who's just so generous. Yeah, I think having any ill will between Tom Brady and the Patriots, Gronk and the Patriots, Belichick and Tom Brady, it's totally subsumed by the goodwill. You know what I mean? Like me and you could have an, but we're still, like you said, we're still friends. You know what I mean? Like, I think that is probably
there are some massive egos involved here, though. When you're talking about, I don't know about Kraft, but definitely
with Belichick. Talking about me, aren't you? You fucking prick.
with Belichick and with Brady, you've seen this with Brady. I mean, even like Brady walking off the field last year after winning that Super Bowl, grabbing Gronk and going, "This is what we do. This is what we do," and he's doing it knowing the camera's picking up. It's like, you fucking cocky motherfucker, I mean,
yeah, but you know me, I don't mind that. In fact, the guy I was hiking with this morning was like, "Oh man, that coach was in a bad mood last night." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" He goes, "Oh, you didn't see? Winston-Salem State, where Allison teaches, got smoked 73-7 by Chowan, another D2, D1 AA, whatever the fuck it is now. They've realigned it. They get smoked." He's like, "That guy's an asshole, the coach." I'm like, "Are you sure?" "Pretty sure Winston-Salem sucks this year." What's the guy supposed to do? Tell his quarterback to throw an interception? Tell P running backs to run out of bounds? He's like, "Nah, he's an asshole. You should never win a game 73-7. Oh, you fucking liberal piece of shit. Yeah, I'm sorry. Oh, God, cut that out. Because I actually liked the guy, but that annoyed me because I don't know how I got on this, but I got on it, so I'm on it. I do understand it when I see it, especially in like a girls' basketball game or something where it's 38-2 Okay, I get it. But football, you cannot throttle down like that.
You said liberal, and I have assumed you've trained Jane, so she now thinks there's one outside your shed.
No, is that what she's? No, that was Squirrel Theater. The squirrels, they like to do a show around this time, around 6:00. They run around. I think it's when they're gathering up their last little acorns for the day. And
So she's applauding.
Yeah, she's driving. She wants those acorns, apparently. Yeah, anyway, cut out that liberal part, because I sometimes share videos with that guy. If you get a chance.
Which guy?
Oh, the guy I hike with. Who
okay, all right, yeah.
Because he is a nice guy. He's actually.
I just, when Brady did that though, it's the reason I have no problem with being cocky. Like, I have no problem if you get together with a team and say, this is what we do. But it's making it seem like me and Gronk came here and that's why you won a championship. That's kind of
that's what Derek, me and Derek have had this thing. I don't even respond anymore. Where Derek thinks he doesn't like Tom Brady anymore because he did the LeBron thing, super team, whatever, bringing in all the best players. But we've talked about that. That doesn't fly in football. Although it's funny, it seems to fly more and more because they add more players every year. So maybe there's something to it. But still,
Derek, to our audience that doesn't know, Derek is a published poet friend of ours.
Yes, exactly. He's a poet laureate of Quinsigamond University. Brilliant man. Brilliant.
But all right, so I guess we'll wrap it up there unless there's anything else you want. We'll probably break this into 2 shows. Sorry
if I bored you guys. I know we didn't talk about the technical stuff you guys often talk about, the audience, but hey, I always like talking to my buddy Kev, and nice to meet you people.